Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome. This is season 1, episode 1 of the Great Valley Writing Project podcast. You can tell because I'm wearing our official Great Valley Writing Project shirt. And what Maddie and I were hoping to do was use this space, 15 minutes to a half hour, to kind of talk about teaching, talk about the writing project, what's coming up, what's going on, things that are on our minds, and then also bring in guests to interview and maybe fellow TCs and talk about what they're experiencing in the classroom and strategies for teaching writing and so on. So it's going to cover quite a bit, but it's all going to be related to teaching writing and the writing project specifically. So I'll start with my co-facilitator, co-podcaster, Maddie. Maddie is a teacher at Ceres High School, and she's also in leadership. I was trying to think of what would be the best title, Maddie, but you're in leadership at Great Valley Writing Project. You do a ton of things, and Great Valley Writing Project would not run if it wasn't for Maddie being involved. She has her newsletter. She keeps me sane. She sends me reminders when things are going on that I should be doing stuff with. She runs the Summer Institute, media marketing, social media, a jack of all trades, I think would be a good way of saying it. Maddie, did I miss anything?
I think my official title is communications coordinator, but I think that is a invented title. I'm not sure if that necessarily captures everything that I do, but yes.
Perfect. And hopefully when we're watching this 6 months or a year from now, you'll see Maddie and be like, why does she have a mask on? And we'll be beyond all of this. But Maddie's at Stan State right now, getting ready to go into her grad class. And she's in a master's program right now. And she was kind enough to still do this before her class. So I appreciate that from Maddie. And our first guest of season 1, episode 1, I really hope this isn't like season 1, episode 3, and it's like, that's it, we're done, is Jeremy Meyer, who is a former student of mine and a current student of mine in writing for teachers at Stan State, Liberal Studies 3009. He was tasked with a group assignment of creating a podcast, and his role in that group assignment is to interview someone who is a part of a writing association or a writing project. And so Jeremy was going to, flattering, he asked if I would do it, and I was humbled by the fact that he wanted to interview me, because I still keep forgetting that I'm the director of a writing project. And then I realized we're doing this podcast, Maddie and I, at 4:00, and I said, hey, why don't we kill 2 birds with 1 stone? You interview Maddie and I, it'll get your job done, and it'll get us off to our first episode. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jeremy, and Maddie and I will take turns answering his questions.
All right. Thank you so much. And it's just an honor to be here amongst 2 great minds. So let's start off. And the first question I have, because I don't know anything about writing associations at all. I remember you talking about it a while ago, but what is the purpose of, I believe was mentioned, like a mission statement? What's the purpose of a writing association, not just a Great Valley, but writing associations in general?
Perfect. Maddie, I feel like I talked a lot. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Well, you are the director of the project, so I will let you take that question.
Okay. So writing associations, and I'm going to answer this as far as the writing association sounds too academic, too professional to me. So I'm going to answer as far as a writing project. Great Valley Writing Project is a part of the California Writing Project, which is a part of the National Writing Project. I should know the number of writing projects within the state. I want to say it's between 12 and 15 up and down the state. We have different writing projects. Chico has a writing, and they're all tied to a university. So Chico has a writing project, San Diego has a writing project, and so on. The kind of the understanding of the mission statement of almost all of them, if not all of them, is this idea of teachers learning from teachers. And so Jim Gray, who is one of the founders of the National Writing Project, I just realized this is all going to be like, people are going to be watching this, so I need to make sure I'm correct in this. I'm positive. I'm pretty sure it's Jim Gray. I'm like 99%. Of the National Writing Project, realized during his time of founding and putting this all together that there's a lot of professional development taking place in the schools, and they would bring in experts and they'd pay them to bring them in, or then purchase curriculum. And what he realized quickly was the experts are already there. They're in the classrooms doing the job day in and day out. And so one of the main focuses of writing projects is to put the emphasis and the expertise in the hands of the teachers that are the actual experts in the classroom. And so instead of purchasing curriculum or whatever the new fad is coming in education, it's why don't we ask the teachers who are in the classroom what they're doing, what's working well, what's not working well, and have them as our resource for leaning on each other to be effective writing teachers in the classroom. And so writing projects, to kind of sum it up, use K-12 or K-16 teachers and put the onus, the accountability, the responsibility on them to study what's going on in their classroom, talk about their classrooms as experts, and to build that confidence and be teacher leaders, teacher writers, and teacher researchers. And so that's kind of a summary, or kind of what the writing project does. Maddie, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, you took my little piece at the end there that I was going to throw in, but what really drew me to the writing project is those three kind of separate identities that the project draws out. The teacher as writer, which is actually my focus for my grad program, so I'm really excited about that. Teacher as researcher, and then teacher as leader. So developing those identities, enhancing those identities, for a lot of times helping people realize they already have those identities inside of them. They just don't have that confidence to be a leader or to feel confident with their research. So those three elements or identities is really what drew me to the program, and why I'm still participating every summer since the first summer I did a summer institute.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Jeremy, I'll add one thing is this idea of confidence. It's something I noticed a lot in education once I started getting involved in teaching, even like as an undergrad, or I would look to my classmates like, hey, like we were just talking about, like, how come you're not talking, right? Like, here's what's going on, like jump in there. And I noticed more so in education, the further along I went, that I would argue more in K-12, there's this like lack of confidence and I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it's, I don't know where that comes from, but there is, and I sense it in my students. I sense it when I work with other K-12 teachers, and it's K-16 also, but I would say that I see it mostly in a K-12 setting. I think part of it has to do with teaching children. And so when you're in the classroom with children, it's easier to like, I'm the expert, I know what's going on. And then when you get into the idea of like professional development or working with other teachers, you're now working with adults. And so it causes that insecurity of like, oh crap, like they're going to know that I'm an imposter. I don't know what I'm talking about. They're going to question me or whatever. And that leads me to the other thing I'll bring up is this imposter syndrome. I think is a real thing, and to the point where a doctoral professor told me once I finished my doctorate, just so I was like, well, this is so weird to be called doctor, like this imposter syndrome. She said, just so you know, that never goes away. And this is a person with a PhD that is very highly regarded in academia, and she's saying it just doesn't go away. So I think that's something that needs to be embraced more and understood more. And I think if we can just be transparent with each other and honest with each other, then it's like, okay, here's where we are. It's okay that we're here. Now let's learn from it. But I think sometimes we go into our classrooms and we isolate so that nobody finds out that we're quote unquote an imposter or whatever the case. And I don't think that's fruitful. I don't think that gets us very far when we do things like that.
Well, and I think it does come, like you said, we hire these outside experts and we get our curriculum from some other. And so it does make you feel as a classroom teacher that you aren't the expert in the room. Like you have to turn to other people to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing in the classroom. And the writing project really says, no, like, you know, your students, you know, your situation, like let's research and let's help each other find out what works best, because we are the ones in the classroom. And I've gotten PD in my district, nothing against this particular professional developer, but who develops or gave us a presentation on teaching in a pandemic, and she's never taught in a pandemic. So to have an expert telling you how to do something who's never done it while we're in the classroom, like you should be asking us like what's working. We should be talking about what's working, what's not working. So to have the stage and the facilitation to do that in the writing project is way more powerful than some other coming in and telling you this is what you should be doing with no context of your situation, your students, your environment, anything like that.
I know I keep saying all that. This is the last thing. It just came through as we were talking about this, but I think what's important as well, in addition, is I mentioned it, but it's centering or putting the onus, the accountability on that teacher. And I think that's an important shift, because as an educator, as you're going through school, a lot of times, you have your professor, your teacher telling you, okay, this is what you need to read, this is what you need to do, and this is what I expect of you. And if we don't ever make that intention, and then you go into your own classroom and they bring in professional development from outside, we're continuing to look for other places like Pinterest, teachers pay teachers. We're constantly looking somewhere else to tell us what we should do. And that's an important intentional shift that I think the writing project tries to make, and that I hope that all teachers make, is I'm educated, I'm smart, I have the resources, I can do these things. And I wish that for all educators, to make that very intentional shift that you're capable of doing these things.
That's a super quick, just a couple things that just based on what you guys were saying and stuff, and the imposter syndrome, I just add my own little 2 cents. I wonder if a huge part of that has to do with, in high school, you're kind of swimming in the fear of failure. You know what I mean? And it's that idea that it's just like, well, if I fail, I might be able to correct it, but I might not be able to correct it. And but if I don't try, I don't have to worry on whether or not. So you're not engaging, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, well, if I don't engage, I can leave and be like, I probably could have done it. I just didn't try. You know what I mean? Right. So,
no, Jeremy, I think that's a really good point. And I deal with that on a daily basis still, this idea of failure. And it always reminds me of Mark Twain. I think it was Mark Twain who said, better to have someone keep your mouth shut and let someone think you're a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And that happened. I think about that all the time, to the point where I think probably some people think like, how come Brett's not jumping in here? And it's like, well, maybe if I don't jump in, I don't have to, you can think of me of a certain way. And it's not a healthy place to be, because you do need to jump in the conversation. You do need to be part of the conversation. But what you just said, what you risk being part of the conversation is failing. And I don't think we live in a society that is okay with you failing and picking you back up. It's usually like, oh, look they failed, they're stupid, get rid of them. Instead of like, they failed, but I appreciate the attempt. Now let's work together based on that foundation. And I think if you can find yourself situated amongst people like that, for example, there's a great Eric Thomas quote who says, go where you are celebrated, not tolerated. And I think if you can find yourself around people like that, it just will improve your life, 1,000 times.
Agreed. So one of the things I actually had gone on is the only way to find the first website that popped up was Stan State for the Great Valley Writing Project. And that's what I had popped on, and I started reading a little bit about it. Here it is. One of the questions I have is that on the Stan State website, it mentions that the Great Valley Writing Project concentrates efforts where literacy is most in jeopardy. And I was just wondering, like, it doesn't elaborate on what that meant, but it got me kind of like, as soon as you mentioned jeopardy, I'm like, what's happening with, is it everywhere in the States? Is it California? Is it just the Valley itself? Like, is there something that is actually kind of where literacy is like failing either teachers and or the students that, this project like responds to?
Yeah. So Maddie, I want you to I have my own opinions on this, but I want you to jump in. And not that you need me to preface you, but knowing where I know you and I have our own private conversations. And so you already know this, but I want to preface you with the context of where you are with things. I feel like you can answer this question as far as students and literacy being in jeopardy, but I also understand that you're in a tough spot because you're in a school district right now. So I just want you to think about that prior to your response, I guess.
So I don't know necessarily if I have the correct answer to what that particular sentence is pointing to, but my own personal opinion, not representing any district or entity thereof, I think literacy in general in our generation is very much in jeopardy. The reading I actually did right before this class for not that I was doing the reading right before class for tonight. I was reviewing the reading, but it was talking about how way back when you could assume that students had read these complex texts. And by the time they got into school, you could discuss them because everybody had kind of this centralized idea, this foundation. And it said now you really can't assume that students have any of that foundational knowledge. I mean, in our classrooms, we're reading one novel per year in secondary. So by the time you're done with 7 through 12, you've read 5 books. And to me, that is a huge problem we need to fix, because if you're a student and in 5 years you read 5 books, you're not really able to have that depth of not only reading, but also getting to the writing portion. You don't have enough foundational text to be able to have those higher level conversations. So it's like you have these very minute texts that you can talk about. And then on the other hand, we also are in, I don't want to say the word crisis. I know that if Dr. Whitman heard this, he would hate that I said an educational crisis, but it is, our students aren't reading as much, and then they get older and they can't read as well. And so we're having these conflicts of not being able to write because we're not really able to read. And so we're not reading complex text. There's not a lot of opportunities to, or even just text at all, like for fun, for academia, whatever. And so in order to write, we have to be competent readers. And so we're really struggling on both fronts. And I think literacy is in jeopardy when you don't have students who are able to, or are reading, or have access to these texts. And as a result, they're not able to have conversations about deep texts. They're not able to write about those texts or about anything because they are struggling. So Brett, I'm not sure if that's exactly where you thought I would go with that. Maybe I'm trying to play it a little too safe on that answer. But just in general, I think that we're at a place where the most that students are reading is, social media, and they don't have access to these texts to be able to see good writing and, reflect good writing and talk about writing. And those conversations just aren't happening. And so I don't blame students necessarily for not having those skills. I just don't know how to fix that problem. So the writing project kind of helps me develop different ways to attack that, especially when, students are reading at a far below grade level skill, trying to get them to a place that we can talk about and write about whatever the subject is something that the writing project definitely supports me in doing.
So I agree with Maddie. To answer your question about literacy, where it's in jeopardy, my immediate thought was up and down the valley is where it's in jeopardy. And the reason I say that is because if you look at this school report cards, look at the dashboards, look at everything, all the data that's out there, and you're going to see math scores and reading, writing scores, they're all going to be low, like shockingly low. Where when I see, I shouldn't say all, a lot of them are. And where I see something that's like 60% passed, I'm like, oh, wow, 60%, good. And we all know that's not good, right? There's still 40% on a best case scenario that aren't doing well. But I think specifically for the statement, some of the work that takes place through the writing project is specific to migrant education, students who are learning a second language. And so those spaces where students could easily kind of fall through the cracks if we don't address how to teach to make sure that those students are also getting the best education they can. I think that's more specific to that statement. But I will go back to what Maddie was saying. I was thinking about the 4 steps of literacy: the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And I am concerned about education. And again, I was going to say students, but I don't want to put it on students. But I think education as a whole has shifted towards, so there's these pendulums that take place, right? Like we're over here and we feel one way and then we swing over this way. And for some reason, as people, we can't kind of settle somewhere in the middle. And I think we've shifted so far away from smacking a ruler on the desk and drill and kill vocab that we've gone to everybody needs to be it even sounds weird to say, everybody needs to be healthy and safe and comfortable, and I don't want to push you too hard. And so as a result, I think the rigor has dropped. And on top of that, we have administrative push where students need to graduate. We want to make sure the numbers get through, and it happens at in higher ed as well. And now we have the pandemic, which is causing like, make sure your students are taken care of. Let's get them through this. And so there's this kind of like perfect storm of dropping the rigor more and more and more. And the concern with that is, where are these students going to be once we come out of this, or once we're done with this? Are they going to have that skill set? And I would argue that they're not going to have that skill set, not because they're not capable, but because of the way that we're approaching education. So I would argue that literacy that's in jeopardy would be the whole valley. And I don't want to speak beyond the valley because I'm not aware of that, but I think it's safe to assume that beyond the valley, there's literacy in jeopardy as well.
Yeah, no, that actually, so the Great Valley Writing Project is teachers collaborating with other teachers. You guys have basically kind of cut out the middleman and just been like, wait a second, we can learn from each other. We're the ones, in the Meyer and whatnot, and we're the ones, teaching the students. Who, like, as far like who can be involved? And also too, it's I know probably future teachers, but are there things that parents can do if they got involved with the Great Valley Writing Project that they can take home and actually help out? Like, is it specifically just geared towards teacher collaboration, future teacher collaboration, or can students like sign up? Is there great things for just regular students that aren't even trying to do it, but if they're like, well, I'm, an English major, but I actually just want to write or anything, like who is it specific, who can join?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Jeremy. So Maddie, do you mind if I start? Okay, so one of the things that we're kind of transitioning into, it started about, 3 years ago, was bringing in, and I'm going to say young, but not in the sense of age young, but in the sense of experience young. So younger teachers who are emerging into the field. And one of the things we noticed is we had a strong group of experienced veteran teachers, and we wanted to start bringing emerging educators into the fold sooner, because for a while, I don't know if it's official, but I think you had to have 3 years or 5 years of teaching experience before you can even be invited to be a part of Great Valley. And so I remember the discussion we had a long discussion with leadership, and we agreed that it would be beneficial to start bringing in younger educators, and we can do it different ways, because part of it too that we're thinking about is we don't want to like bring them in while they're just starting teaching, because that's a lot going on your first year and we don't want to overwhelm. So we're trying to figure out the best way of navigating that. So that's one kind of area that we're focused on specifically at GVWP is emerging educators. Another area that is really important to us is family literacy. And so we've been doing family literacy nights recently and had conversations about how can we ensure that when we're working with teachers, we have areas that we're making sure that parents are involved and families are involved, because I don't want to speak for all leadership, but I feel safe in saying that leadership embraces the idea that if we're going to have a strong education and a strong community, that it can't just be with the teachers. The students need to be involved, the teachers need to be involved, and the parents need to be involved. It's all three of those, along with the admin. So like, we're trying to include or do events and programs to involve family. On top of that, like I mentioned, the emerging educators. And then the last kind of area that I'll touch on is a direction we're trying to go, and I'm trying to push, is empowerment and self-authorship and agency. This won't be agreed upon by everybody that listens to this, if anybody listens to this. But I think there's and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, I think there's a tendency right now to victimize is loaded, but that's for lack of a better phrase or term right now, is victimize students and you poor thing, let me help you. It's constantly like, let me help you, let me help you, let me help you. And I think if we do that too much, we start removing or lessening that student or that human being's ability to say, I don't need you always to help me. I appreciate it when I need it. Like I really, really need it. But I can do this. Like I can do my homework like I'm supposed to. I can access these things. I can find the resources. And so another part of it, and we're actually doing a program early next year, is about empowerment, welcoming the unwelcome, welcoming the adversity, self-authorship, and this idea of reframing adversity. And so moving away from the tendencies we're seeing of, there's a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, or the coddling of the student's mind, something to that effect. And moving away from doing that and starting to put more agency and accountability on the student and the teacher to realize that they're absolutely capable of doing these things, and you still support your students and your teachers, but that you have agency to take care of these things. So I think that family literacy, emerging educators, and this idea of empowerment would be where I see the writing project as far as involvement and direction it's going.
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that, just a side note, but in the like empowerment and agency, something that I've seen in the research that I'm doing and I hate is when you tell students like we need to help them find their voice. So it's like students already have their voice. We just need to let them, like, give them the opportunity. It's not hidden. They don't need to go look for it. Like they just need the opportunity to use it. So working some of those things in. But during my research in the grad program, and hopefully I'm going to continue this next semester and do some projects with it, but to tie in future pre-service teachers, so not even necessarily in the student teaching, as Brett said, once you kind of get into the classroom, like you're swamped and you're slammed, but so people who know they want to be teachers but aren't quite there yet, developing their identity as a writer and get them into the place where they feel comfortable and competent talking about writing. So when they do get to the classroom, they already have that identity kind of solidified, because that's really the biggest growth that I see in teachers who go through our summer institute. Is they start and they're like, I'm not a writer. I don't write. I don't talk about my writing. And by the end, they're like, I am a writer. Like I do know how to talk about writing. I do enjoy this process, and seeing how they feel like they can take that back to their classroom with them and talk about writing with their students. And it's almost that it's not even a strategy, it's a mindset shift of I can talk about writing because I am talking about writing with this group. So I really want to develop a future pre-service teacher writing group to be able to develop those identities and solidify those identities. So by the time those teachers get to the classroom, and I want to draw in some students as well, some high school students to be a part of that group, maybe not the whole time, but partially. So it is a collaborative process. So future teachers hear from students and students hear from people who want to be teachers, and really kind of merge those worlds, because they are so very separate right now. And I think that if we hear from each other, not just other teachers, but also the students that we teach. I tell my students all the time, I work for you. Like the principal signs my paycheck, but like I work for you. I need to be a part of this conversation. And they appreciate being in those conversations and talking about what they need and what they can bring to the table. So to answer that question, I really want to even more widen the scope of who we work with as a program. Hopefully that's okay with Brett.
Oh, that actually.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say super quick, what you just said, it actually got me thinking that I completely agree with you. It's almost like, going to a professional baseball game, and this professional pitcher is like, he's been doing it for years and he knows all the pitches already. And it's like, ask me a question. And you're just like, what question could I possibly ask you that, it's just like, it's intimidating. It's just like but you're there because you want to get your degree, and obviously this case and whatnot. But there is kind of this thing with teachers where it's just kind of like, they already know everything. They're just trying to see what I know, and I don't want to tell them the wrong thing. And like you said, kind of leveling that playing field, I think is absolutely huge. That's great. So another question that I had is, I was wondering if this writing association was location specific, or would you guys accept people from anywhere? Like, is
So
this? Yeah.
sorry, yeah, it is location specific. So I should see if I can find it on the website. But it has, so like I was mentioning, we have BOP, which is Bay Area Writing Project. We have the UC Davis has a writing project. CWP, no, C3W, something like that. And then what's the school? Humboldt, they have a writing project up there. And so, yeah, it is one of those things. The only thing I can think of to frame it as like a gang. Like there's gangs that, this is our territory. You don't come into our territory and pull teachers from there. But it's not a gang in the sense that, like the fall conference that's coming up on Saturday, I share that information with all the writing projects in California to hopefully pull them in to come check those things and participate. But we respect that. I'm not going to go up to Chico and be like, oh, there's this teacher up there, and then you should be a part of the Great Valley Writing Project. We respect that Chico has a writing project, and we point them, this is true too, we point them to that writing project. So if we know that there's someone like at Stan State who's just got a new job in San Diego and is teaching writing, then it'd be my responsibility, I feel, to point them to the San Diego area writing project and connect them. Like, you may find a connection here at this person. So there are specific areas, but we share, but we respect also that here's where you're pulling from for your writing project.
I think that is a really cool thing. I mean, if there is a cool thing about this pandemic, but like everything has kind of shifted to Zoom. And so you see way more of what other people are doing and hopping into some of those things that other people are doing that are interesting. So like Brett said, we are localized and kind of in our area, but if another writing project is doing something really cool, there's nothing that says I can't attend because I'm in this writing project. They're not going to exclude me from it. So we can kind of get like the best of all worlds right now until things go back to normal, if that exists anymore.
And Jeremy, just to kind of get a sense of, and this is not going to be specific, but just kind of a relative sense of the Great Valley is, I just recently dropped goodie bags off to people who participated in our ILI. And I went as far west as Tracy, as far north as Elk Grove, as far east as Pine Grove, and as far as, actually I didn't, but as Maddie will be, as far south as Delhi. So that's just kind of a quick, that's where some of our teaching consultants are located.
Oh, okay. All right. That's actually really interesting to know because, when I first kind of, obviously recently due to the project that we're doing, started looking into it, I kind of thought that it was, and like you pointed out, Zoom, you can do it anywhere and everywhere. I kind of thought it was like, and you could have Colorado, you know what I mean? Like getting invitations and jumping in and stuff and whatnot, and like collaborating and stuff. And so that's actually really interesting to know that each area has kind of its own, like you said, little gang.
Yeah. What's fun about it too is like, we have the California Writing Project. We have meetings once a month, 2 different types of meetings. And then Maddie was on the last one for the National Writing Project. We have a network, Connecting the Network call that I think it's happening once a month now. But on that Connecting the Network, all these site directors from all over the US were there. And so then we'd go into breakout rooms to talk to different site directors, and they would just put you in these random ones. So I was with somebody from Connecticut, New Jersey, and then the other one was like Louisiana, Lafayette, down in that area. And then I'm from California. So like, then we're talking to each other about what's going on at our site in that state. And so it's interesting to be connected to not only the teachers we have in the Great Valley Writing Project, but in the California Writing Project, and then broadly in the National Writing Project. And to be honest, like, it is connected. Elise is the director for the National Writing Project, and I sent her a little message, a direct message on a little platform that we have, and it was within an hour. Like, she responded to me, answered my question, and it's like, you're the director there now, but she doesn't feel that way, right? She's very accessible and that kind of thing, and that's something that the Writing Project has always done well.
Nice. And just to make sure that I'm not going over anything, are we still okay for more questions, or did you have to get to a class, Maddie?
My class is at 6, so I have to cut off at 5 to kind of finish some things, but we're still good for now.
So
Okay,
I'm gonna go let the dogs out because they're moaning for some reason at the door. But Jeremy, what do you? Cause I was hoping for like 30 minutes, and I know Maddie and I'll speak. I know as teachers we can talk. I know myself specifically. So what do you think about maybe we'll do a 1 question wrap up, maybe like and Jeremy, would you be? I have one in mind. Would you be okay with if I threw the question out there? Okay, let me open the.
You're gonna ask your own question?
Yeah. But
He's
after
like,
he walks away, though,
yeah, I know how to close this up. There's some suspense. Brett likes to set some mystery, leave us wondering.
I'm currently moving towards the edge of my seat.
So Jeremy and I were talking beforehand, before we started recording, and I was telling him about a podcast called Invisible Men, which I highly recommend those watching to check out. It's on YouTube, and it's Ian Rowe, and I forget the other guy's name that's in it, but it's 2 African-American men who highlight other African-American men who are doing wonderful things in education or in society. And the way they close out, they start with a kind of a shorter question, which is Malcolm or Martin. And then the guest answers that and explains why. And the last question they finish with is this made up Daryl, who's a 16-year-old African-American male trying to figure out education, trying to figure out his life. And what advice would the guest have for Daryl as a 16-year-old trying to figure things out? And so what I was thinking for us, and what Jeremy was thinking about asking was, I would consider us now seasoned or experienced teachers, as a Jeremy who's emerging as an educator. What advice would we have for an emerging educator, specifically in terms of maybe just as an educator, but as far as teaching writing with where we are now? So since I stole the thunder from Jeremy and asking the question, Maddie, would you like to answer that? And then I can try to answer that so I can think about it a little bit.
I like how you're like, here's the question, Maddie, take it away. You had all day to think about it. So just to make sure I understand, is what advice would we give, not to Daryl, 16 years old, but to Jeremy as a future educator in terms of writing?
Yeah, and I think, why don't we do that? We can, if we decide to run with this in the podcast, why don't we use Jeremy? Jeremy's yeah. So what advice would you give Jeremy, the emerging educator, as he's moving forward?
So I think not necessarily pertaining to writing, but I'll get there. But as an emerging educator, I think now more than ever, there's a lot of negative talk about teaching as a profession and about, I hate to say it, students and parents. And really, you kind of have to put your blinders on. I tell people all the time, I love teaching. I don't love everything about teaching, but you're going to hear people who are going to try to dissuade you and try to push you away from the whole profession. And really, you have to want it, but if you want it, it is I love what I do. I love the students. I actually left for 3 years to work at the district office, and I miss the kids so much. I came back to teaching, which I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic when I did that. But just in that regard, don't let other people kind of suck you in and take that joy away from you, because there will be people who try to do that, and you kind of have to, okay, thank you for your opinion, but I'm going to move on. As far as teaching writing, I really strongly believe, and that's why I'm doing all my research in this field, this area, and getting my degree, and trying to bring projects up. But I would say to write, just the more you can write and the more you feel comfortable with writing, it's going to transfer so easily, not only in how you give students feedback, because you know what kind of feedback is helpful to you and what kind of feedback is hurtful to you, but also in talking about language and helping students play with language. And I think that when you are not identifying as a writer, you shy away from a lot of that, and you tend to assign a lot of writing and then not really talk about or teach writing. And then it turns into this big frustration because you don't have that ability and you don't know how to talk about it. So my advice to you as a future teacher of writing is to get in the habit of writing, and as much as you can to feel like a writer. And if that means joining a writing group or a writing community or something that gives you that place to give feedback and get feedback and write regularly. And I think that's going to carry you so far in the field of not only teaching writing, but just your own personal growth. So my advice to you as a future teacher of writing is to really hold on to that identity as a writer. And if you don't currently feel comfortable saying, I'm Jeremy and I'm a writer, get yourself to a place where you do feel comfortable with that, because it's going to give you so much in the classroom and in your personal life.
So I'll be talking to the made up Jeremy. When I was thinking about this, and Maddie, I didn't have all day to think about it. I just thought of this question recently. But when I was thinking about this, you're not going to make a ton of money teaching, but I will say that I do feel so much better and comfortable now in the profession I'm in, because I can save money. And that's because, it's just Annie and I in our 3 labs in a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. So we also live small and modestly, but that's not if that feels good and brings you comfort and peace. But when I was thinking about this, and what's really been the most important thing to me and most beneficial thing to me about being an educator is people. And I know it sounds cliche and it sounds, whatever, but it reminds me, and I'll say this briefly, but what's really weird, Jeremy, is my best friend, JC, junior college, was a guy named Jeremy. And he and I went off to AmeriCorps together, spent 10 months together doing firefighting, helping, victims of Hurricane Katrina. And we've since separated, and it wasn't a romantic relationship, but we've since separated. And he has his own life in Nevada and Las Vegas, and he's the captain of a fire department, or wildland fire department, and has a wife and kids, and he's doing really well. And I'm happy for him. But when I think about that friendship, the reason it was such an important friendship for me was because there was never a doubt in my mind that he would always stick up for me, and he would always be there to support me. And we always had each other's back, no matter what. And I knew that whether he was there or wasn't there, I always knew that we had each other's back. And that was the first time I really felt like connected to a human being, like in that way. I almost felt like a military, like you went to war together and that this person's there for you and you have this bond. And because of that, what I also noticed in teaching is I strive for that as a teacher with my students. I want them to know that when it comes to us in our classroom, the 25 of us or whatever the case, I'm not going to allow somebody else to come in here and badmouth you or take away from your education or not be supportive of you. And so my role is to be supportive of you. I expect that same thing out of you towards me. And so as a future teacher, more broadly, but also as a teacher of writing, I would argue that the best thing about teaching is having those relationships, and not those relationships that get misconstrued currently, which is being the friend. I think the friendship's important, right? Like making sure that person knows that you're a friend or you care. But I'm talking about what Zaretta Hammond calls the warm demander, where I care deeply about you, and you're going to find out because I'm going to be here to support you, but I'm also going to be honest with you. And if you turn something in, a piece of writing that doesn't live up to I'm going to tell you that it doesn't. And it's not because I don't like you, it's because I do like you. And I want to make sure you have the best education. I want to help you improve as much as possible. And the same light, I want students to feel comfortable coming to me and talking about, here's a concern I have. Can we address this in class or whatever the case? And I'll say that happened for me with Virginia in the dissertation, where we had to be very vulnerable with one another. We had to be transparent, and she had to tell me when I wasn't reaching the bar. And we had a friendship prior to that teaching relationship. And so we had to balance the friendship along with the teaching relationship and letting me know that she wants the best for me and she's gonna push me. And so when I get emails or messages from former students, and it's those emails that I take pride in that other teachers are not getting. and I don't mean for that to sound bad, but I know that they're not getting those same emails. And they're not, and the reason in my office, I miss my office so much, is because in my office, there's cards and letters. It's everywhere in my office. And people can look at that however they want to, but I'm not going to stop doing it. That to me is what teaching's about. But I going back to what I just said, I would feel those are empty words or empty cards if all I did for those students was praise them and tell them how wonderful they are. When I see a student give me that card or that letter or that email, and I know, and I think about it, I was like, yeah, we had some tough conversations, and they pulled through and they come out the other side. That's a rich card and a full experience for me. And so my hope is I can do that for 25 years or 30 years, whatever it is. And that's what I would tell Jeremy, is to strive for that and do whatever, the research, all of that stuff. Some people are going to say it's fun. It may be fun once in a while. It's not fun all the time. And so the reason you're doing it is to make sure that you are improving your life and you're improving the life of another. And I think if you can come out of education doing that, and not just another. Students say that all the time, and I always call them out on it because they'll say something in their teaching profile or their narrative saying, if I could just change one life, and I always stop them because I remember saying that too when I was younger. If you spend 25 years teaching and you change one life, so switch that too. Like if I can change thousands of lives for the better, because you have that potential and capacity to do that. So I don't know if that's a direct answer, but I think if you can get your mind wrapped around the real benefit of what this job and the real product and the real tangible feeling of doing this job well, you'll forget that you're getting a paycheck on the first or whatever, and that'll just be icing on the cake. And you'll be successful too, because it's one of those things that if you do the right thing and you're doing it for the right reasons, success will find you. Good people will find you. You'll be surrounded by those people, and life will be good. That's my advice for Jeremy.
No, that's absolutely excellent. And in regards to having that frame of mind with what you both just shared, I'll share a little story I was having last night with Amy, my fiance. Is I was telling her, I actually got into this very passionate, like, I'm not going to stop with a classroom, like I'm going to keep going and I'm going to figure out what's going to make it run the best. And I told her, I was just like, I'm going to get teacher of the year, like 5 years in a row for the state of California, just because of how my classroom runs. And she goes, oh my God, that's great. Is that a thing? And I said, it will be. It definitely will be. I'm going to make it happen, because there's something about, and I completely agree with the both of you, that it's beyond the paycheck. And I've worked with, kids in after school programs and tutoring centers, and I've worked with elderly adults, and I work with special needs adults right now and stuff and whatnot. And it's just being able to be a part of their lives and whatnot. And then when you come back, it's I'll just share this small thing and I'll let everybody go. But I was doing, right now we have COVID running rampant at our center for the special needs adults, and they're just sitting in their rooms and they don't know why. So I just took it upon myself to go from room to room and exercise with them, because they have like partners. So I started doing squats, like 100 squats later, I was done or whatever, which is just 10 rooms. But that night and the next day, they were just like, are we going to do that again? Like, that was so fun and and it's something so small, but it makes you just feel so great, where it's just like, you guys like that yesterday? And they're, oh yeah, we loved it. So it's like, all right, I guess we'll do it again. Here comes another 100 squats, but it's, I want to carry that into any classroom I'm in, into any school I'm in, into any, thing like that, where I want kids outside of my classroom to be able to come to me for educational advice and anything that they need. They don't even have to be my student, but I want to have that persona that, it's completely open and stuff and whatnot. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great, Jeremy, you already know how I feel about you and the things that I see that you're doing, and that aligns with the person I know. I want to just mention this briefly, and I'll try to be succinct about it. I think a lot of times educators, because typically people who go into education are good people who want to improve lives, I think sometimes they conflate making people feel good with actual improvement and growth. And I would caution those listening and future educators to don't settle for just making people feel good, but instead raise the bar to making the connection and people feel good about themselves, while also ensuring that they're improving and there's growth taking place. And so that assessment part of it comes in, where we're not just doing it to pat all of us on the back, like we're all just doing the circle of patting each other on the back, but we're doing it because we want to support one another, and we want to make sure that I as a teacher am growing and you as a student is growing. And if that's not taking place, if we're just patting each other on the back, I personally can't get behind it. But if we're patting each other on the back while growth is taking place, then I think that's where the sweet spot is. And I just wanted to mention that because I think that's an important distinction that sometimes we forget because we're allowed to. That's all I got.
Very nice. Well, I just want to take this opportunity then to thank you both very much for allowing me to not only be a part of this, but thank you for helping me out with the project I have coming up.
And thank you, Jeremy. This was, like I said, we're trying to figure out, okay, what should the structure of this be? And that was clutch of you to host this on the very last minute too. So I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you as a student in our class. And I appreciate you as a man in the work that you're doing outside of our class as well.
Yeah, I just want to thank you both for letting me be here as a part of this. Jeremy, I did put my email in the chat if you have any other questions, or you might possibly be interested. I'm gonna put a little plug here in being a part of my writing group that I'm trying to set up next semester. Just let me know, because I think that your outlook is amazing, and you just have that thing about you that makes me excited to be doing what I'm doing and connecting with people like you. So I'm excited for your future. I know I just met you, but I can tell you're gonna do wonderful things in your career and your life. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
So that is an official wrap on the Great Valley Writing Project podcast, season 1, episode 1. See y'all. Don't go anywhere. I'm just going to stop. See y'all. Thank you very much. Enjoy the show. Make comments if you want to. Like, subscribe, share, hit the little bell. Yeah.